Good evening, every pony. You know, it just occurred to me that we don't really talk about the Cutie Mark Crusaders on this show very often. Not by any malicious intent on my part, though I'd forgive you for thinking that, but mostly just because I haven't picked up a fic where they were the main focus. As a trio, I think the CMC are enjoyable enough. Scootaloo has been the main character in some of my personal favourite episodes. Sweetie Belle is a precious cinnamon roll wrapped in another cinnamon roll. Apple Bloom is... Apple Bloom. Okay, I guess there has to be one low-hanging fruit, but the point still stands. I enjoy the CMC as characters. Now that you all know where I stand on that deeply polarizing issue which has shook the very foundations of this fandom on multiple occasions, let's dive into a fic about these butt-tattoo crusading hooligans. Today's fic is called A Head Full of Clay, and it's written by Squinty Mudmane. The fic centers around one of the many ill-fated attempts of the CMC to get their cutie marks. After going their separate ways for a while, Apple Bloom gets a book from the library which details the travels of a pony named Tincoat who made some sort of groundbreaking discovery. So Apple Bloom goes to her friends and says, "Hey girls, you wanna see a dead body?" I'm just kidding, it's not the dead body they're gonna go find. It's what the dead pony made that they're interested in. More specifically, a golem. And as a team, they go off together to find out what's been buried under the sands of time. A pretty interesting premise if I do say so myself, and thankfully the writer manages to follow through on the fic's premise by writing a pretty engaging story. When it comes to writing a story that has a dynamic trio like the CMC as its main characters, it's important to make sure that their characters are believable and distinct from one another. The good news though is that Squinty manages to hammer home the writing on each of the three fillies. Apple Bloom is easily the most gung-ho of the three, jumping headfirst into situations without really thinking them through first. Sweetie Belle has some great moments of snark between a few of the characters, and personally I really enjoyed what the writer did with Scootaloo. Not only did he give her a great inner conflict over the possibility that Rainbow Dash is just using her as a means to an end, resulting in some pretty great scenes between the two, but he also completely avoided the whole Scootaloo is an orphan trope. Here, instead of being an orphan, it's revealed that Scootaloo does in fact have a parent, a father named Ember, and as an extra little add-on, he's crippled, missing a wing and a leg. This plays into the fact that Sweetie Belle and Apple Bloom haven't met Scootaloo's parents yet. It's not that she doesn't love her father, she does, and that's very apparent in the scenes that they share together. It's more so that she's worried of what her friends will think if they find out that she doesn't have a mother and they see her father in his current state. There's a few things that you can infer from that. Perhaps she doesn't want the others to feel sorry for her, or maybe she loves her father too much to bring a pony to the house who might ask awkward questions. It's a welcome change from what I've seen in most fanfiction, and in addition it's a change that makes complete sense. Earlier I pointed out that Scoots has some internal dialogue over whether or not she's being used by Rainbow Dash. That story arc is pretty interesting and offers some great development between the two characters, but it's not an isolated incident. All of the Cutie Mark Crusaders get their own personal gripes to work through. Sweetie Belle has to work through her relationship with Rarity, as she wants to become more independent and not have her big sister being so protective of her all the time, as well as trying to figure out why she's not able to use her magic. Apple Bloom at the start of the story is also shown to be so desperate to get her cutie mark, resorting to chasing an old legend to do it, but as the story progresses we see that she wants to finish the quest out of a sense of moral obligation towards what she finds down there, but at the same time struggling with her feelings of having lied to Applejack over why she was going on an adventure in the first place. And knowing Applejack, yeah, she doesn't take the whole lying thing very well when she finds out. I know I did the whole comparison to Stand By Me earlier when I mentioned the dead body, but really, the more I thought about it, this story does have a lot in common with Stand By Me. The group of kids off on a possibly dangerous adventure, learning things about themselves and growing as people, their ponies, as they do so. And while it didn't have the same heavy impact on me that Stand By Me did, I can still appreciate how the author was able to capture that same sense of mystery and danger and the feeling of having to grow up a little and appreciate your friends more by the time the whole thing comes to an end. At its core, that's really what it's about. A story about a bunch of dumb kids on a quest that's way out of their depth. As well as the CMC getting a lot of the spotlight, their respective sisters also get a good amount of time devoted to them, showing each of their relationships with their sisters at the beginning of the fic, and then progressing them to show how they deal with the realization that their sisters are in fact growing up. Each of them takes this news very differently and reacts to their departure in a variety of ways. It's a tidal surge of worry, regret, fear, sadness, anger, or in Applejack's case the kind of anger that devolves into, I'm going to tear that filly in half when I find her. Which is understandable, but it still caught me off guard just a little how this usually reserved farm pony got to a point where she was telling Princess Luna to essentially piss off and get out of her way. Rarity and Rainbow also get their own arcs, which work just as effectively as AJ's. While I still maintain that Rarity is my favorite of the main 6, I really enjoyed Rainbow Dash's development. It was nice to see RD really examine herself and call into question her relationship with Scootaloo. It leads to a lot of great moments between not just herself and her little sister, but also Scoots' father. A pony who, might I add, is not at all above throwing shade in RD's direction over her suitability as a role model. And in her defense, she actually does act on the advice given to her by Scootaloo's father and a few of the other ponies. I'm not the biggest Rainbow fan, but even I have to say I really enjoyed reading her segments. Rarity also has her own development to go through, but the problem is, her little story is wrapped up very quickly at the start of the fic. And what she's given isn't bad, it's just that she sort of learns what she needs to learn and then doesn't really go any further. But I don't think that the rest of the fic suffers because Rarity's development is so short-lived, since we have, like, 5 other characters to develop over the course of the story. What I think really helps this fic work is that it knows how to build a good mystery. The story gives away just enough information about what's going on to keep you invested, but holds off on some more crucial info to drag you along the way. Once the CMC uncover the golem that was buried by the pony Tincoat, they start to uncover more about the mystery involving the mysterious pony and the existence of even more golems in Equestria. There's a very well implemented ticking clock in the story, as once their sisters find out where they've gone and what they're doing, they just come bolting after them with the rest of the group in tow. In addition, the golem that the fillies uncover is also aware of a task that it's been set by a group of other golems, and also goes running towards their final destination. It made for good suspense to see what the CMC would find when they arrived and how their sisters would react when they finally caught up with them. And by the end, I was very satisfied with how the author finished the fic's separate story arcs. Everything had a well-rounded conclusion, the CMC wrapping up their stories with their sisters, Golem completing its task and deciding what it should do next. Hell, Princess Luna shows up towards the middle of the story to give some exposition on the golems, and the conclusion to her own little story is also very satisfying. It pays well if the reader comes away from your story thinking that everything that could have been wrapped up is wrapped up in a good way, and this fic really exemplifies that. If you couldn't tell, I quite like this one, but I do have 1 or 2 little complaints. If I could say anything negative, I'd have to say that the story does take a little while to get going. The actual adventure that the CMC embark on doesn't really begin until around chapter 5. However, I say that knowing that the first few chapters are dedicated to setting up the different characters and the struggles that they're all going through, so it's entirely possible that I'm just nitpicking. The next thing, though... oh boy, how do I explain this without boring the shit out of you all? Buckle up, kiddos! We're gonna talk about grammar. And no, it's nothing to do with the apostrophes or commas being in the wrong places. I could care less about that when it comes to how I review stories. No, this complaint is directed solely towards Applebloom and Applejack. For those of you who have been paying attention over the last 7 years, you may have noticed that these 2 characters have an accent. Let me tell you something about accents. If you read a character who is established within a book to have an accent, it really doesn't matter how their dialogue is written, because you can hear that person talking in that accent throughout the story. In this case, however, the author chose to write the dialogue for AB and AJ phonetically as one might hear it if they were talking. And, while I perfectly respect your decision to do that, 1, I can't help but feel that it puts unnecessary work on you as the author to have to write whole sentences like that, and 2, it was bugging the shit out of me by chapter 10. It makes it far more annoying because I've seen other writers write dialogue like this better and in a much simpler way. Let me give you all an example. Take The Green Mile by Stephen King. We're getting wild with the Stephen King comparisons in this video, folks. That story takes place in Louisiana, a state in the south of the USA. Naturally, when you hear south of the USA, your brain can fill in the accents of the characters because most likely you've heard that accent before. King didn't need to write every I as ah or every reckon as reckon, because you could just do that yourself by reading the dialogue. The same is true of the 2 farm ponies, only here we definitely know what they sound like because we've been watching them for 7 years now. You can write dialogue normally and just have faith in your audience that they will hear the accent even if the words are written like normal speech. And trust me, it'll probably save you a good bit of work in the long run. But other than that, I really can't find anything else to complain about. I think the characters are all on point, the mystery it creates is well paced and has a great conclusion. It's a very well-rounded and enjoyable story. If you've got some time to kill, take a look at it and see what you're missing. Bit of an uneventful review, I know, but Trust me, compared to what I'm used to, this is a welcome change of pace. Regardless, thank you all very much for watching. I'm EmeraldComet, and I will see you all next time.